Your fortress is your home, and just like real life, your home will inevitably come under siege by hordes of angry warbands of buff green men wanting to kill you and your friends. I have a siege due in a few minutes, so that's why I'm going to show you the very best way to help defend your fortress in Shadow of War. So you should subscribe to stay updated for any future attempts to conquer my home and raid my lifetime supply of creatine. Not to mention, only like 1% of you are actually subscribed. So let's get into it. So, now I'm going to explain the Assault Force Siege upgrades. These are the ones that you're going to be using when you attack a fort. Let's start with the Sappers. Sappers are pretty much what I use, what I consider to be the best overall for breaching the fortress. They can pretty much one-shot every door. If all of them get to the iron door, they will one-shot it. If half of them get, or just like 3 or 4 of them get to the wooden door, they will breach it. They're also great because this is pretty much a throwaway upgrade. Like, it will not have any effect after like the first approach. So you'll pretty much want to have something that'll be quick, easy, efficient, and the sappers do the best job for that. There's also the mounted cavalry, which will just bring in a group of Karagor riders. Again, this is not good for breaching. This is more of for flooding the fortress in those first initial moments with a few extra troops. Obviously, most of your troops will be locked out, so your Karagor riders will pretty much just go in alone. Kind of useless, in my opinion. Then, of course, the second best for this is the Ologs. The Ologs will attack the walls and crumble them, pretty much destroy them. But the problem I have with this and why I don't use it is it takes longer than just blowing up the main gate. And not to mention, if there's fire spouts or poison spouts, that'll pretty much render it null and void. Your Ologs will die. If you have an Olog captains will automatically do this. So there's that, which will damage them, you know. So I find it a whole lot easier to just use the zappers, and everybody will just kind of cluster into the fortress through that main gate. Then, of course, for the host, you'll want the defender host, but there's also the savage host, which is basically shock troopers. This will pretty much ensure that the enemy troops will be at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, so you'll be killing most of them due to these savage hosts. Of course, I like to use Defender Host. I believe it's the best one. It's pretty much allows you to capture victory points faster. This means that you'll have a lot more shields, a lot more resilient troops, which will last a little bit longer during the siege. They won't die as much, but they'll also give you the added benefit of making sure it's a whole lot faster. Like, the process of capturing the fortress will be faster with Defender Host. Then you have Hunter Host, which is for beasts. They're pretty useless since most forts are not beast oriented. And, most of the forts you'll be fighting will be randomly generated anyway. And you can always kill war chiefs and such to change the siege upgrades. Pretty much the worst type of host. I like to use the Defender Host. I like those for you guys. But I would use Savage Host if I have to mix it up. But Defender Host, or Hunter Host, my apologies, is not that great. Then we have the Siege Beasts. These will be at the perimeter when you first start the siege and will be in charge of that first initial bombardment. Fire Siege Beast will attack structures, so we're talking walls and gates. They'll pretty much ensure that those crumble a whole lot faster. There is also the Poisonous Siege Beast, which will focus on enemies. That means enemy Siege Beasts and the interior walls. So they'll pretty much be bombarding the captains and war chiefs defending the fortress. There is also Cursed Siege Beasts, which are pretty much useless. They'll pretty much just terrify grunts, pretty much, and if there's a captain or war chief that is susceptible to curse, they'll affect those, but it won't be as good. I suggest either fiery or poisonous. I always like to use poisonous. I believe it's the best one. Now for the beasts you'll be bringing, you can either use Shelob's Brood, Graug, or Wild Drake. Shelob's Brood will storm the fortress, just infest it with spiders, which are friendly to your defenders or attackers. My apologies. And you'll pretty much have a huge advantage. These spiders will one-shot every orc unless they're a captain. So they're just great for dealing with all of those troops if you find yourself often getting overwhelmed during a siege. There is, of course, the War Graug. The War Graug allows you to have a allied Graug. It's dominated, and it will allow you to ride it, use it to destroy gates, deal more damage against walls and the enemy troops. Then there is a Wild Drake, which will attack everybody indiscriminately, attackers or defenders. I like to use it if I know I'm going to dominate it quickly, but if not, I prefer the War Graug. Honestly, all of these three are great, and you can mix them up either or, but I prefer the War Graug because it gives you that versatility of being able to destroy the gates and such. Then we have the archers you'll be bringing. Fire archers will just deal fire damage. I find them to be pretty useless. Archers don't really affect the outcome of the fight too much. They're pretty much just there. So I like to use the mounted archers, but there's also the farsight archers. They have a lot more range. That's about it. They're just regular archers, more range. Then there's the mounted archers, which I prefer to use because they simply have caragors. So they ride caragors, so this will allow you to have more beasts. So let's say the archer that's riding it dies, you'll still have the caragor, which is very good and very useful for overwhelming enemies. And then of course we have the final, which is kind of the passive one, you could say, is inspiring banners, which will just enrage your grunts and make them attack faster as well as deal more damage. But then you have the overpower one, which will pretty much ensure you capture victory points faster. Your orcs will capture victory points faster. Obviously, it's a whole lot better if you're looking to speed up the process of capturing the fort quite a bit. If you're looking to just deal more damage and handle the enemy troops, then I suggest inspiring banners, but I prefer overpower. So this is my pretty much setup right here. We have the sappers at the top to destroy the gate right off the bat, get you into the fortress. We have the defender host to help you capture victory points faster, or you could use savage host to deal more damage to the troops, keep that under control with less crowds. Then we have the poisonous siege beast, so that their siege beasts die fast, and we get some initial hits on the first checkpoint. After that, I like to use the War Graug, but you can use either of these three. So I use the War Graug so I can deal damage to the structures as well as capture victory points at a bit of an advantage without taking damage myself. Then we have mounted archers, which give us the added benefit of caragors should our archers die. And then we have overpower, which will just make capturing the fortress a whole lot easier. Now let's move on to the defense upgrades. Now for the defense upgrades, this will pretty much have very little to do with the captains or your orcs itself, and more about the fortress. First, we have the walls. You can have stone walls. These will basically off tiers. The higher, the better the wall, just the more resistant it'll be. That's about it. It also affects how it looks, but overall, that's pretty much what we're going for. We have the stone walls. They'll pretty much reinforce it, give it a bit more extra health. We have reinforced stone walls. Of course, this increases the health even more. And then we have metal walls, which are the best and have the most health. These are almost impenetrable and require a very long time and a lot of damage to break through, which is the one obviously you want to use. After that, we have the Iron Gate. It's what I prefer to use. It's better to have this than the fire spouts so that your whole perimeter is secured. It just makes sense to me how if I have metal walls, I should also have iron gates. That means they'll be far more difficult to breach and require all the sappers at once to be able to do it. Otherwise, you'll need to bash it with a ground, and it takes a long while. I think it takes 3 hits. Don't quote me on that. I believe it takes 3 hits. But yeah, that's why I use. There's also poison spouts, which are for the outer wall. They'll deal poison damage to your Ologs and captains trying to climb. And then there's fire spouts, same thing as the poison spouts, but with fire damage. Then we have the same 3 hosts that we had for the attacking army, and that is the Savage host, the Defender host, and the Hunter host. All the same things, but the Defender host will hold the victory points faster. So, what this means is it'll take a little bit more time for the enemy to capture a victory point when you have the Defender host. So, obviously, we'll want to use that because every time the attackers capture a point, the fortress wall is breached and more attackers flood in. Of course, then we have the Fiery Siege Beast, Poisonous Siege Beast, and Cursed Siege Beast. I prefer the Poisonous Siege Beast here as well, but you can substitute it for the Fire Siege Beast since they'll pretty much be useless up until, like, from the beginning, they'll be useful, then until they breach the inner walls, that's when they'll be useful again. But besides that, they won't be doing too much. Now we have the beasts. We can have a pack of Caragors roaming the fortress. That'll pretty much ensure that there's Caragors all around you, attacking the enemy troops. Then we have Hellfire, which is what I like to use. At every gate, there will be a Drake that will act as a flamethrower. And since we have the Iron Gates, there's that grate on the gate, which will pretty much ensure that while they're battering your gate, they'll be taking fire damage. This is also a great way to counter sappers because once the Drake uses its flames, the sappers are still not enraged to deal damage to the gate and they will explode prematurely. Then there's again the War Ground. It'll pretty much defend the fortress and you can ride it same as the Assaulting Ground. Then I like to use Spiked Walls. This prevents orcs from climbing up the outer walls and inner walls, making it even more secluded, making your fortress even more isolated from the outside. It's a whole lot more difficult compared to having fire archers or fireside archers, which are kind of useless. Well, not as useless when defending fort because there's more of them around, but you get my point. I prefer to just keep the orcs out rather than sacrificing it for archers. Then the final one, we have poison mines and fire mines. This will pretty much ensure that the outside of your fortress, when the attacking army is rushing in, will be bombarded with mines that are placed throughout at random. For this, you need to beat the fight pits in every region individually. Once you beat the champion of each region, it will unlock this upgrade that you can buy, and it will unlock these 2 options. Of course, I like to use either or. It doesn't really matter for this since it's the first few moments of your siege. They won't really have an effect in the long term. But if I'm using Poisonous Siege Beast, I'll usually use the Fire Mines. A good way to mix it up and deal 2 types of damage. Maybe even get some Balefire if you're lucky. But that's about it. All of this is just my preference, and it's what works best for me. Of course, you can mix it up and change it to suit your own playstyle. This will be one of the last guides I make for the game. So, if you have any suggestions or questions, be sure to let me know in the comments section below. That's about it. Have a good one, and bye.